Thank you all for attending today's event and continuing to follow social distancing best practices and keeping our community confident. On behalf of the Bloomington Normal community, we would like to thank Governor Pritzker, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and our elected officials for their leadership during these trying times. We in McLean County know the challenges of developing incentive programs, and we applaud all of you for creating the big grants. These grants will go a long way in supporting our small businesses across the state, and we're very happy to receive 25 grants in McLean County, including our YMCA. At this time, I'd like to ask Governor Pritzker to come up and say a few words.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Patrick, and thanks so much for hosting us here today and for the work that you do in the Bloomington Normal region, of course, and for the whole state, just helping us navigate through this very difficult time. I know everybody here plays a role in that, but I just want to make a special note of the work that you do right here where we're standing. To Normal Mayor Chris Coos, for your leadership, thank you very much. And of course to Leader Jason Barrickman and to Leader Dan Brady and Representative Keith Sommer. I just want to say thank you for your partnership. You know, we have become friends even when we disagree on things, and it is important to me to try to work across the aisle wherever we can to find common ground, especially in a moment like this, in a pandemic, when there's so much that we need to do for the people of Illinois, no matter what party they belong to. You know, one of the best parts of our jobs, those of us who get elected to public office, is when we get to see firsthand what a difference the programs that we create can have, not just on the lives of the entrepreneurs and small business owners, but on the lives of their families and the lives of their workers and their workers' families. To that end, I want to thank BJ and Al for joining us today and for the support that you offer to area families, particularly looking ahead into the school year. Small businesses are the backbone of Illinois' economy, and our #1 employer statewide, by far, are our small business people. And the $46 million in the business interruption grants in this initial round will reach more than 2,600 businesses in over 400 cities and towns across 78 of our 102 counties, including over 24 right here in the Bloomington Normal area, places like Fringe Salon and Prima Beauty Salon, Studio, and Castle Theater, Pizza Ranch, and the Vrooman Mansion Bed and Breakfast, just to name a few. There are people who are providing important services and products to all of us that are included in this program, that we want to make sure that they survive and thrive through this. These are our local barbers and our diners and our gyms and much more. They're woven into the fabric of our communities, and crucially, they've borne the brunt of the most severe financial impacts of COVID-19. In designing this program, it was so important to me and to the General Assembly to alleviate some of the burden that's carried by these small businesses, particularly those that have faced long-standing structural barriers when it comes to business expansion and success. And that's why we provided grants for those with less than $3 million in annual revenues and reserved a portion of the program for those who were completely shut down in the spring, as well as those that are in COVID-impacted areas that experience property damage amidst the looting and civil unrest in June. Over $24 million of this first round of grants is going to organizations in disproportionately impacted areas, and half of the total businesses receiving awards in this round are minority owned. While many elected officials had a hand in making that possible, there's one who was unable to join us here today that I want to especially name, and that's Leader Jahan Gordon Booth. I want to thank her for her work ensuring that the big program, as we call this, operated with equity at its core. In total, the BIG program will support thousands of small businesses that have suffered losses due to the COVID pandemic, with substantial amounts focused on downstate businesses, and with a special focus on our child care providers, an essential underpinning of our workforce for countless working families. Fighting the virus's effects on our health and safety has been top priority for me from the very beginning. But I also want to say that fighting the economic impacts of this virus has also been top priority for me. Just like the virus attacks our health, and particularly the health of our most vulnerable people, it also hits the most vulnerable parts of our economy. Months ago, I recognized that we needed to prevent a housing crisis. So I banned residential evictions and placed a moratorium on utility shutoffs during this pandemic. On Monday, I launched the largest rental assistance program in the nation, and because our nation is facing a greater need than any one state has the ability to meet, I will work very hard with the champions in the General Assembly as well as the champions in Congress to advocate for more federal assistance to keep people in their homes. Protecting jobs and wellness has been a top priority too. So I halted vehicle repossessions and I launched a new small business support program, in fact several of them, including the one we're talking about today. In June, we expanded assistance for those in need of food, temporary shelter, help with utility bills, and other essential services. And yesterday, we extended the deadline for nutrition benefit applications to the end of August to make sure that all eligible children get the food assistance that they need in the months ahead. I've said since day one of this crisis that I would fight for Illinois, and I have, over the last 6 months, worked hard to do that, and we've also evolved as the needs have evolved. But what has remained the same throughout this entire period is that I'll do everything that I can to support our families and revitalize our economy, and I'll work with members of the General Assembly on both sides of the aisle to help us get through this tunnel that we're all in and to the other side of the COVID-19 pandemic and build a stronger and more inclusive Illinois. So I want to thank all of you for coming today, and I'd like to turn it over to our DCEO, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, Acting Director, Michael Negron. Michael?
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Negron. I'm the Acting Director for the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, or DCEO. And I'm very happy to be here today to talk about the support that we're providing to Illinois small businesses through the BIG program and standing with important leaders from the General Assembly, community leaders, as well as Patrick Hoban of the Bloomington Normal Economic Development Council and representatives of our Bloomington Normal local chambers. We are here today to not only talk about the first wave of BIG grants, but also to acknowledge and to celebrate the important role that so many of our grant winners play in their communities. As Al Nathan and the entire team hosting this here at the YMCA can tell you, we're gathered at a true community anchor. Every year, thousands of residents rely upon the YMCA for after-school programs, sports, and other critical youth enrichments. But nonprofits are not immune from having to balance their books, and this pandemic has forced many of the same hard choices upon the YMCA that our businesses are facing right now across the state. The YMCA had to close their doors for a period of time as Illinoisans buckled down in the midst of this deadly pandemic. For the YMCA, the $20,000 grant that they're receiving through the BIG program not only offers it the funding it needs to continue to serve families in the community, but also allow them to make improvements to meet residents where they're at in the midst of this pandemic. The grant will offer the YMCA the cash flow needed to operate Y Academy, which is a program that's providing electronic learning to school-age students. There are thousands of businesses just like them still out there in need of support to navigate this unprecedented crisis. As we finalize future rounds of BIG, we'll target additional business types that have faced reduced operations or other COVID-19 circumstances that have forced them to close or adapt. These next rounds of BIG will include targeted support for other sectors that may not be as quick to return to full operations, such as performing arts and live music venues, event spaces, indoor recreational facilities, and movie theaters, and more. Importantly, more than half of future rounds of BIG funding will be dedicated for downstate communities, and roughly a third will go to businesses in communities that have been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. We expect to open the application for the next round of BIG in the coming weeks. Businesses can learn more and stay up to date by going to our website at illinois.gov/DCEO. That's illinois.gov/DCEO. Now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Al Nathan of the YMCA to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon. I'm saving paper here today, so. On behalf of the YMCA and the Bloomington Normal community, Governor Pritzker, and the Development Economic Opportunity Council, I want to thank you for granting us the business interruption grant. That's going to make, as indicated, a significant difference for what we do here at the YMCA. This grant will allow us to continue programs that we have going here. It will to meet the community needs. In addition, I want to talk to you in particular about the Y Academy program. This program is a program that is set up to, over the past few months, very different, challenging for most of us. So what we're looking at with the Y Academy program is for an environment that is safe, secure, and it allows learning opportunities for junior high and elementary level kids. We have we have 3 locations that we currently are working with, and that is Cedar Ridge Elementary School, North Point Elementary School, and then Kingsley Junior High. What has driven this to urgency to move this program along quicker was a recent decision to go from classroom learning to e-learning. So we have several parents who are currently in a bind to find a place for their children to go. So this program assists with that. And as the Y has done before with Learn to Swim programs, summer day camps, things of that nature, we've stepped up to the plate again and met a community need. These locations right now, as of last evening, and I don't think that has changed since then, we had 160 kids enrolled in that program. We have 20 children that are on a waiting list right now. We are currently working with school administrators and churches to try to fill that gap so that we have additional space for those kids that have a need, or those parents that have a need for some place for their children to go. As always, with all of our programs, we offer financial assistance for those who are unable to pay for those services. So in closing, again, I want to thank Governor Pritzker. I want to thank anyone who was involved with helping us move forward with the business interruption grant. And thank you very much for those funds will help us, as indicated earlier, those funds will help us be able to continue to provide the programs that help meet the needs of the folks here in Bloomington Normal. So thank you very much. And Patrick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Al. Everybody has a Y story. They call it What's Your Why? And I think the Y Academy is going to just spread that message even further. As we look forward to trying to find out when the next round of PPP comes through, we know that the PPP loans only affect so many. So it's great that the state representatives, the governor, comes up with programs to catch those businesses that fall through the cracks. And then locally, we work with our county and elected officials to create another round to help them out as well. As you can see, we are very proud of the continued partnership with Governor Pritzker, DCO, and our elected officials. At this time, I'd like to invite Governor Pritzker back up to answer any questions.
Happy to take any questions from members of the media. Well, as you know, the big program is much bigger than the amount of money that we've already given out. We had to create the program, we had to make sure that we got applications for the program, and we launched the first tranche of that program, and that's what we're talking about here today. There's much more in that program that the General Assembly set aside from the federal dollars that came in for the purposes of trying to ameliorate the challenge that businesses and other people have had from COVID-19. So we're working on, getting all of those grants out the door and launching every aspect of what's been created by the General Assembly in order to assist businesses. I would also say that we're trying to also help our universities, ISU, and all the rest of our really great public universities in Illinois to get open. One of the big important things that needs to happen for universities across the state is there needs to be enough testing available on a regular basis for all the students, the faculty, and all the people who work on campus. We are working very hard on a massive expansion using perhaps the U of I saliva test that's been developed. It's still under development. They've had a lot of progress, and we're all very hopeful for it. And so I'm hoping that we'll be able to take something like that and make it available to all of our public universities and maybe even our private universities across the state.
Governor, you mentioned schools reopening. High school and grade schools around the area have to open as well. Some are online, some will be open. With this cases surging, should schools be reopening? What do you think on that?
Well, I think you know that I'm deeply concerned about the direction that the numbers are going across the state of Illinois, and I'm also deeply concerned to make sure that we do as much as we can to provide the proper education for our kids. We all know from all the studies that in-person learning is better than e-learning in terms of the retention by kids for what they're learning about. And so, I'm hopeful that schools across the state have the ability to offer in-person learning as well as e-learning, but I understand when schools have chosen to go all e-learning because the challenge is great. I mean, I think all of you have seen the regions across Illinois, although we track it by region. Every region is frankly going, well, depending on which day you look at it, it's going the wrong direction. Overall, the state is. We're trying to ameliorate that, and we've asked, and I know many of you have responded to that, we've asked the public as well as elected officials across the state, municipalities, to put mitigations in place or to follow the mitigations that already are in place, like the mandatory mask order that we have since May 1. So we're going to do everything we can to make the state a place where schools can open properly with hopefully a hybrid offering in some locations if they haven't already gone e-learning.
One quick follow-up. The schools have opened in person. Those who already have opened in person, are you satisfied with what? Are they done properly? Received private hallways? What's your assessment there?
You can only really judge that by doing testing and making sure that communities and particularly county boards of health are monitoring those schools. It's very important that we get this right. And I'm gonna, if we have to step in certain situations where there's an overwhelming number of, or a large number of kids who are, and adults, by the way, who are getting tested positive for COVID-19, and we need to do something with the local school, we're gonna work on that. And it's especially incumbent upon the local public health departments to help us with that. So I can't really pass judgment yet because there are so few schools as yet that have already opened, but I've looked at the pictures and read the stories about schools in Georgia and other states where they've opened and nobody's wearing a mask and there's been transmission that nobody expected. Well, I think we all would have expected it, but at least in Georgia they didn't expect it. And so I'm very, very worried about that. And I'm worried about communities in Illinois that are choosing to just ignore the mandatory mask order or to fight against masks in schools, because we have to do this, folks. It could be the most important thing we do to bring down the spread of COVID-19 across the state. Wearing a mask, social distancing, following just the basic rules that we set out from the Illinois State Board of Education, and then the guidelines that each school district has put in place to make sure that those schools can open safely.
Governor, about that.
Yes, sir.
So local enforcement agencies seem to be a little hesitant in taking the punitive approach that they brought forth with the order last week. They insist that educating businesses has largely been enough, and the metrics here are generally better than they are in a lot of the rest of the state. Do you think that goes far enough, and do you feel that there should be a more aggressive action here in my county?
Well, first let me applaud the businesses that are doing it right, that are in fact following the mitigations and generally speaking asking the people who come into their stores to follow the mitigations. Look, one of the reasons that we wanted to make sure that we got a new rule passed that would apply to all businesses is because the ones who are following the rules are unfortunately competing against folks who aren't following the rules. So think about a bar owner that is limited in capacity because we needed to the 25% capacity, right? And then they're competing against a bar that's a block away or 2 blocks away that isn't following the capacity limits at all. That's not fair. And so we wanted to at least create a baseline for every business so that they would compete on a level playing field, number one. Number two, in that rule, as you saw, what we provided for was education. As you said, that's the first thing, right? It's a warning and education about what needs to happen in order to follow the mitigations within that establishment. Number two is, if needed, a dispersal of the excess capacity of people that are in a store. And so that really, for the most part, just means letting people exit at their own at their own pace, but not letting new people in until you get down to capacity. That's what many stores can do anyway. And then if a store or a restaurant or a bar is ignoring both the warning and the dispersal and gets to a third stage, it seems like they're doing it at their peril. I mean, they're choosing not to follow the mitigations. And at that point, it is available to the local authorities, county board of health or law enforcement or state's attorney or others, to issue a ticket. And it's a monetary fine, $75 to $2,500. Typically, the larger end of that will be on larger businesses. It'll be up to local enforcement authorities to decide that. And then, of course, it'll ultimately be determined at the state's attorney level whether that's an appropriate amount to fine somebody. So we tried to create something that would work for businesses and that wouldn't be too intrusive. And remember, this is just asking businesses to make reasonable efforts. It's not like if somebody insists on coming in and they take their mask off and they're going to be difficult about it. Nobody's asking a business owner to confront that person or a worker to confront that person and have to have an argument with that person. We're simply asking you to make reasonable efforts. That includes putting a mask, a sign up that says, no mask, no service, might be an example of a way to keep people from doing it, and also just keeping the capacity limit, or maintaining the capacity limit.
Governor, you said a couple days ago we're in a make or break moment. If we go to break moment, who's to blame for the cases?
You want to place blame? The virus is to blame. Let's start with that. This is an insidious virus. You don't know whether you've got it sometimes because you're asymptomatic. You may not have been tested. You may have been tested one day. You could get it the next day, be carrying it around for 3 days without any symptoms. I mean, this is an insidious virus. And by the way, then, the quarantining that's needed after you come in contact with somebody who's got the virus. So this is very challenging. I don't want to lay blame here. We all, though, have to take some responsibility for the mitigations. I mean, the very, very basic thing, I'm going to say it over and over and over again, and my apologies for sounding like a broken record, is everybody needs to wear a mask when they're in public and cannot socially distance. Have to. It's the most important thing that you could do. That's what all the doctors say. I was on the phone with one of the best doctors in the world, who happens to be an Illinois expert this morning, and we were talking about some of the latest studies that show precisely that masking is most important. Again, distance, masking, washing your hands, just following some basic rules. We can get through this. There are vaccines that are in the works. I think we all have seen that there are treatments that are in the works. We all should pray for the people who are developing those, and in the meantime, let's just be kind to each other and stay healthy by following the mitigation rules.
How many rounds do we expect today?
How many
rounds?
I'm not sure how many rounds we're going to end up with. I mean, we have allocated several $100 million, and this is the first 46 that's being announced. There'll be another piece of this first $60 million tranche that'll get announced soon. Whether that comes in, 3 or 4 different rounds is really a function of how fast we can get the money out the door and identify the businesses that qualify with the applications they put forward to us.
How much longer does this continue then?
Well, I mean, we have significant economic challenges across the United States. And so I can't tell you exactly, but look, we want to help businesses and the Y and other organizations stay open and alive and survive through this and ultimately thrive at the other end of it. So we're going to do everything we can with the resources that are made available to us. I guess this is my opportunity to put a plug in for the federal government doing its part. It's sent trillions of dollars already to large businesses and to try and help out, folks that, that have done well already. And yet the need for us to maintain public safety, to maintain services at the local level here in Normal and Bloomington, the funding that will be needed for that, so we don't have to lay off police and fire, some we already have had to do. At the state level as well. We need the federal government to step up to the plate and provide local governments and state governments with the funding that's badly needed, just to replace the missing revenues that are missing as a result of COVID-19. Nothing else. We just want help with what the effects of COVID-19 have been on our state. And I would add one other thing. I talked to Republican governors and Democratic governors across the country. We've had to band together, all of us across the aisle, to manage through COVID-19. There's not a governor that I've talked to who does not need the support of the federal government in this effort. So thank you all very much.